Welcome back to the Lagoon, everybody. I hope you've had a wonderful morning, day, night, or witching hour, whatever time you tune in to visit the Grand Library. It's always up to you. And I hope you're ready for a triple feature presentation. This video is going to be very different from the previous audiobooks that I have done. It might run on slightly longer, but we will be reading about really 2 to 3 tells. One is just kind of like a page, and it's more or less a kind of geeky thing that I wanted to do, especially after the Hound and we discussed the Necronomicon. And you know, as has already been previously stated, that's a very popular book in pop culture. Especially with the revitalization of the Evil Dead series, with the Evil Dead reboot or remake, whatever you want to call it, and Evil Dead Rise, and then of course Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness being horror classics, all using Lovecraft's Necronomicon within that series. And then there's also a film called Necronomicon, and if I'm not mistaken, that is the film where Jeffrey Combs himself plays H.P. Lovecraft, and it's very much a cult classic film. It's fun, it's pretty sweet. You get to see a Deep One coming in holding the Necronomicon and stuff like that, and it's kind of like a Creepshow anthology kind of series. But yeah, we're going to read today the history of the Necronomicon, as well as Azathoth and Nyarlathotep, and we're going to discuss both those entities and kind of geek out, nerd out, and then after that we will probably then read to you the Cats of Althar in another video, and then we're gonna from there make our way to Kingsport with the Terrible Old Man. And then the prior week to that, there will be a very special Christmas video, and attached with that special Christmas video will be another Dream Cycle tale, my personal favorite, The Strange High House in the Mist, which also resides in Kingsport. So the next couple of videos after this one, we're going to move to the other seaport town of Lovecraft's, Kingsport. We've spent a good deal of time in Arkham, Massachusetts, and in Boston, and later, of course, we will venture to Innsmouth, and of course, we will also go to Dunwich, and in between Dunwich is where the Color Out of Space takes place. So eventually, we'll stop there as well. So there's a lot of fun stuff in store. I think I already know what the New Year story will be, and it might as well be a heavy hitter, and but we'll wait to discuss that on the Christmas video. So you have much to look forward to at the Grand Library and the Lagoon. So with that being said, let's kind of discuss the history of the Necronomicon. It was written by Lovecraft in 1927 and published in 1938. It describes the origin of the fictional book of the same name, the occult grimoire Necronomicon, a now famous element of some of pretty much majority of the stories. The short text purports to be non-fiction, adding to the appearance of pseudo-authenticity, which Lovecraft valued in building his Cthulhu mythos. Accordingly, it supposes the history of the Necronomicon is as the inspiration for Robert W. Chambers' The King in Yellow, which concerns a book that overthrows the minds of those who read it. Now, the great Robert W. Chambers. I would love to read his stuff. I'm not 100% sure if it's public domain, but Lovecraft kind of took all of his writings and said, well, they're also in my universe as well. And if I'm not mistaken, Nyarlathotep, one of Lovecraft's closest friends, later then kind of softly expanded upon lore and said that Hastur is the name of the King in Yellow, and that he is the brother of Cthulhu, as we could possibly perceive what a brother would be to these entities, these cosmic beings beyond our comprehension. And then, of course, with that you have the yellow sign. So I would love to read some Chambers stuff, and maybe I can, maybe I won't. If you haven't read those, I highly recommend. You can see how it immensely inspired the majority of Lovecraft's works. But without wasting any more time, because we have 2 other short stories to read, let us read the history of the Necronomicon. Now, I do not have this. Unfortunately, was not printed in any of these Arkham House books that I have. It may be in the Outsider and other stories, which I'm pretty sure it is. But I don't have that book because that one's really hard to get. It's really rare, and if you do find a copy, even if it's beat up, it's way expensive. I could basically buy a new computer for its price. So I think I will spend money that way rather than on that book. But maybe one day I can read from that mystical tome from you. So for now, I'm going to read this off of the internet. And you can easily find all of Lovecraft's writings online and other audiobooks on YouTube as well. But I'm very glad that you're here listening to me read it to you in the Grand Library. So without dragging on further, let us get cozy and get our drinks ready, and I will relate to you the history of the Necronomicon by H.P. Lovecraft. Original title, Al-Azif, being the word used by Arabs to designate that nocturnal sound made by insects supposed to be the howling of demons. Composed by Abdul al-Hazred, a mad poet of Sana'a in Yemen, who is said to have flourished during the period of the Umayyad Caliphate, circa 700 AD. He visited the ruins of Babylon and the subterranean secrets of Memphis, and spent 10 years alone in the great southern desert of Arabia, the Roba al-Kahai, or empty space of the ancients, and the Hana, or crimson desert of the modern Arabs, which is held to be inhabited by protective evil spirits and monsters of death. Of this desert, many strange and unbelievable marvels are told by those who pretend to have penetrated it. In the last years, al-Hazred dwelt in Damascus, where the Necronomicon al-Azif was written, and of his final death or disappearance, 738 AD. Many terrible and conflicting things are told. He is said by Ibn Khalakhan, 12th century biographer, to have been seized by an invisible monster in broad daylight and devoured horribly before a large number of fright-frozen witnesses. Of his madness, many things are told. He claimed to have seen fabulous Irem, or City of Pillars, and to have found beneath the ruins of a certain nameless desert town the shocking annals and secrets of a race older than mankind. He was only an indifferent Muslim, worshipping unknown entities who he called Yog-Sothoth and Cthulhu. In AD 950, the Azif, which had gained a considerable though superstitious circulation amongst the philosophers of the age, was secretly translated into Greek by Theodorus Philotas of Constantinople under the title Necronomicon. For a century it impelled certain experimenters to terrible attempts, when it was suppressed and burned by the Patriarch Michael. After this it was only heard of furtively, but in 1228 Olaus Warmus made a Latin translation later in the Middle Ages, and the Latin text was printed twice, once in the 15th century in black letter, evidently in Germany, and once in the 17th, probably Spanish, both editions being without identifying marks and located as to a time and place by internal typographical evidence only. The work, both Latin and Greek, was banned by Pope Gregory VIII in 1232, shortly after its Latin translation, which called attention to it. The Arabic original was lost as early as Wormus' time, as indicated by his prefatory note. In no sight of the Greek copy, which was printed in Italy between 1500 and 1550, has been reported since the burning of a certain Salem man's library in 1692. An English translation made by Dr. Dee was never printed and exists only in fragments recovered from the original manuscript. Of the Latin text now existing one, 15th century, is known to be in the British Museum under lock and key, while another 17th century is in the Bibliothèque Nationale at Paris. A 17th century edition is in the Widener Library at Harvard and in the Library of Masonic University at Arkham, also in the Library of the University of Buenos Aires. Numerous other copies probably exist in secret, and a 15th century one is persistently rumored to form a part of the collection of a celebrated American millionaire. A still vaguer rumor credits the preservation of a 16th century Greek text in the Salem family of Pickman, but if it was so preserved, it vanquished with the artist R.U. Pickman, who disappeared early in 1926. The book is rigidly suppressed by the authorities of most countries and by all branches of organized ecclesiasticism. Ecclesiastism, sorry, can't read. Reading leads to terrible consequences. It was from rumors of this book, of which relatively few of the general public know, that R.W. Chambers is said to have derived the idea of his early novel, The King in Yellow. So, really cool, really cool little short little paper there that Lovecraft himself did there to add to this mystical tome, which we had just read about in The Hound. And you notice Pickman was mentioned. So you see what I'm doing here. I am guiding you very accurately into the mythos. I could have done a little bit more dream cycle stories, but you know, we could do those. We could do those here in a minute. You know, we could do that. We got all next year. You know, come on. I'm gonna guide y'all. Y'all trust me, believe me. Personally, I may have thrown in 2 more dream cycles before we got to where we got, but you know what? You guys are hungry. You know, you need the solid food of the mythos. You know. So that's really cool. Also, fun fact, when I was out having a nice date night with my wife, we went to Barnes & Noble, and we went to the, you know, spiritual section, the religious section, the theological section, the occult section, and we found the Necronomicon, and I tried to open it and summon Cthulhu in Barnes & Noble's. It didn't happen, unfortunately. But it's kind of cool because they have this kind of pseudo Necronomicon book that you can buy. And it's supposedly, you know, from Aleister Crowley, and stuff like that, or he somehow had it too, and it's basically a bunch of occultist LARPing that Lovecraft stuff is real, and they basically just reprint a bunch of old Sumerian black magic from Sumeria and their mythology with, you know, all that fun stuff. And in their mythology there is a Cthulhu, but he's considered Cthulhu the Lord of the Undead. He was a more hardcore metal version than Hades, in my opinion. But you know, it's more fun to pretend that it's, you know, Lovecraft's Cthulhu, because you know, Lovecraft kind of takes stuff in the occult and other religions, as I have previously stated in other videos, and subverts them with his own monsters and philosophies, and a lot of times his stuff is cooler than the real stuff. But in saying that, this book, the Necronomicon, that you can buy, I believe it's like $10, and you know, it can really destroy your life if you try to practice it, because it calls for a lot of self-mutilation and stuff like that, which you should never practice, and who in their right mind would want to. But The Girl in the Color Out of Space adaptation that the great Richard Stanley just made a couple of years back, yeah, I think it was 2020, it might be 2021. But that's a really good adaptation of The Color Out of Space, and he kind of sneaks that book in there too, you know, and he was trying to do a Cthulhu Mythos trilogy film, but he ultimately didn't have that ability to happen because of some horrible people trying to cancel him, and he was later justified in court, and that's a whole lot of drama that I don't want to get into at all. But I hope Mr. Stanley is able to recover from all of that and make his trilogy, because I would love to see his version of a Dunwich Horror. So the Necronomicon is going to appear quite often from now on in some of the mythos stories that we read, so I wanted to go ahead and get that kind of out of the way, and I thought it would be a cool segue into our next story, which is called Nyarlathotep, and it is a weird fiction short story by Lovecraft, and it was written in 1920 and first saw its publication in that year's November issue of the United Amateur. A lot of November, right? A lot of November, and it is November, so it's fun to upload this in autumn, because Lovecraft seemed to have written a majority of the tales I'm reading to you in autumn and in this month. But the poem itself is a bleak view of human civilization in decline, and it explores the mixed sensations of desperation and defiance in a dying society. Wow, that's probably relevant to our time, isn't it? But what's cool about this, I just kind of want to read to you the background of this before we go into it, because it is kind of a very short story. But Nyarlathotep was based on one of Lovecraft's dreams, actually. And the first body paragraph of the poem was written while he was still half asleep. So, oh my gosh, it's, what is it called, spirit writing or whatever? The poem, which stands as the first appearance of the titular Cthulhu mythos entity Nyarlathotep, was described by Lovecraft as a nightmare. So it's real! Get your tinfoil hat on! In the inspiring dream, Lovecraft read a letter from his friend Samuel Loveman that contained an invitation which is as follows. Don't fail to see Nyarlathotep if he comes to Providence. He is horrible, horrible beyond anything you can imagine, but wonderful. He haunts one for hours afterwards. I am still shuddering at what he showed. So, yeah, I guess it is real. And so you can see why there's a bunch of nerds online that really believe that this kind of stuff's real. What have you. I know there's certain sects of the Church of Satan that think Leviathan is Cthulhu, and that he came to Lovecraft in a dream and gave him all this stuff, and Nyarlathotep is Lucifer and all this kind of other stuff. But we here at the Lagoon, try to respect everyone's views, but at the end of the day, this is fiction. This is not real. This is a cosmic horror. It's a horror story. Lovecraft was just very intelligent and knew how to attach his monsters to people's belief systems, and that's why you see a lot of people even today that think that this stuff is real. And there's also some kind of weird form of, they have tarot cards now based on this stuff. They have like Kabbalistic tree of lives based on this stuff. A lot of new age and occult stuff think that these things are real. If you choose to believe that, that's on you, and who knows. I've had horrible dreams with these monsters, and so did Lovecraft, and he's the one that wrote it. So maybe it is real, and we all need to get our tinfoil hats on. But joking aside, let's have a good time, and we are going to read Nyarlathotep. So get all snug. Nyarlathotep by H.P. Lovecraft. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos. I am the last. I will tell the audient void. Oh wait, hang on. I gotta restart. I'm sorry. That's not the right voice. Hang on. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos. I am the last. I will tell of the audient void. There we go. I do not recall distinctly when it began, but it was months ago. The general tension was horrible. To a season of political and social upheaval was added a strange and brooding apprehension of hideous physical danger. A danger widespread and all-embracing. Such a danger as may be imagined only in the most terrible phantasms of the night. I recall that the people went about with pale and worried faces, and whispered warnings and prophecies which no one dared consciously repeat or acknowledge to himself that he had heard. A sense of monstrous guilt was upon the land, and out of the abysses between the stars swept chill currents that made men shiver in dark and lonely places. There was a demonic alteration in the sequence of the seasons. The autumn heat lingered fearsomely, and everyone felt that the world and perhaps the universe had passed from the control of known gods or forces to that of gods or forces which were unknown. And it was then that Nyarlathotep came out of Egypt. Who he was, none could tell, but he was of the old native blood and looked like a pharaoh. The Felkin knelt when they saw him, yet could not say why. He said he had risen up out of the blackness of 27 centuries, and that he had heard messages from places not on this planet. And to the lands of civilization came Nyarlathotep, swarthy, slender, and sinister, always buying strange instruments of glass and metal and combining them into instruments yet stranger. He spoke much of the sciences of electrical and psychological, and gave expeditions of power which sent his spectators away speechless, yet which swelled his fame to exceeding magnitude. Men advised one another to see Nyarlathotep, and shuddered, and when Nyarlathotep went, rest vanished. For the small hours were rent with the screams of nightmare. Never before had the screams of nightmare been such a public problem. Now the wise men almost wished they could forbid sleep in the small hours, yet that the shrieks of cities might less horribly disturb the pale, pitying moon as it glimmered on green waters gliding under bridges and old steeples crumbling against the sickly sky. I remember when Nyarlathotep came to my city, the great, the old, the terrible city of unnumbered crimes. My friends had told me of him, and of the impelling fascination and allurement of his revelations, and I burned with eagerness to explore his uttermost mysteries. My friends said that they were horrible and impressive beyond my most fevered imaginings, that what was thrown on a scene in the darkened room prophesied things none but Nyarlathotep dared prophesy, and that in that sputter of his sparks there was taken from men that which had never been taken before, yet which showed only in the eyes. And I heard it hinted abroad that those who knew Nyarlathotep looked on sighs which others saw not. It was in the hot autumn that I went through the night with the restless crowds to see Nyarlathotep. Through the stifling night, up in the endless stairs into the choking room, and shadowed on a screen I saw hooded forms amidst ruins and yellow evil faces peering from behind fallen monuments. And I saw the world battling against blackness, against the waves of destruction from ultimate space, whirling, churning, struggling around the dimming, cooling sun. Then the sparks played amazingly around the heads of the spectators, and hair stood up on end, while shadows more grotesque than I can tell about out came squattered on the heads. And when who was colder and more scientific than the rest, mumbled a trembling protest about imposture and static electricity, Nyarlathotep drave us all out, down the dizzy stairs into the damp, hot, deserted midnight streets. I screamed aloud that I was not afraid, that I never could be afraid, and others screamed with me for solace. We swore to one another that the city was exactly the same, and still alive, and when the electric lights began to fade, we cursed the company over and over again and laughed at the queer faces we made. I believe we felt something coming down from the greenish moon, for when we began to depend on its light, we drifted into curious involuntary formations and seemed to know our destinations, though we dared not think of them. Once we looked at the pavement and found the blocks loose and displaced by grass, with scarce a line of rusted metal to shew where the tramways had run, and again we saw a tramcar, lone, windowless, dilapidated, and almost on its side. When we gazed around the horizon, we could not find the third tower by the river, and noticed with the silhouette on the second tower was ragged at the top. Then we split up into narrow columns, each of which seemed drawn in a different direction. One disappeared in a narrow alley to the left, leaving only the echo of a shocking moan. Another filed down a weak-choked subway entrance, howling with a laughter that was mad. My own column was sucked towards the open country, and presently felt a chill which was not of hot autumn. For as we stalked out of the dark moor, we beheld around us the hellish moon glitter of evil snows, trackless, inexplicable snows, swept asunder in one direction only, where lay a gulf all the blacker for its glittering walls. The column seemed very thin indeed as it ploughed dreamy into the gulf. I lingered behind, for the black rift in the green-litten snow was frightful, and I thought I had heard the reverberations of a disquieting well as my companions vanished. But my power to linger was slight, as if beckoned by those who had gone before. I half floated between the titanic snowdrifts, quivering and afraid into the sightless vortex of the unimaginable. Screamingly sentient, dumbly delirious, only the gods that were can tell. A sick and sensitive shadow writhing in hands that are not hands, and whirled blindly past ghastly midnight of rotting creation. Corpses of dead worlds with sores that were cities, charnel winds that brush the pallid stars and make them flicker low. Beyond the world's vague ghost of monstrous things, half-seen columns of unsanctified temples that rest on nameless rocks, beneath space and reach up to the dizzy vacua above the spheres of light and darkness. And through this revolting graveyard of the universe, the muffled maddening beating of drums and thin monotonous whine of blasphemous flutes from inconceivable unlighted chambers beyond time, the detestable pounding and piping whereunto danced slowly, awkwardly, and absurdly the gigantic, tenebrous, ultimate gods, the blind, voiceless, mindless gargoyles whose soul is Nyarlathotep. So metal. Like, I'm sorry, that's so metal. Like, straight up, you know. And it's a shame that Nyarlathotep honestly isn't more popular, and honestly isn't in more films. However, if you have seen the film The Empty Man, many saw, you know, you watch the trailer and it doesn't look at all like it's going to be Lovecraftian, but spoiler alert, it is. The main enemy, or the main entity in that, is Nyarlathotep. He is the Empty Man. You know, one of the titles of Nyarlathotep is the God of Many Forms. You know, he's basically this shape-shifting entity that can take whatever form he wants, and he basically trolls humanity. Like, I guess he just does that. And we will also read a poem about Nyarlathotep, and it alludes how he doesn't like his father, Azathoth. And Azathoth, who we will read a short story about next, in this video, is considered the supreme being of this cosmology. He is known as the grand architect of the universe, the creator of all life, the blind idiot God. A lot of that you can tell if you're familiar with Gnosticism or other philosophical branches. That would be the Demiurge. Like I said, Lovecraft takes a lot from different religious belief systems and an occult and subverts it and puts his own monsters in it. You know, ultimately at the end of the day, this is a fictional story, you know, like I said, but you know, he was so intelligent on how he attached it to things that people believed, so that way those that do have faith could read this and be like, oh, this is a scary monster, you know. It's and I love how all of his scary monsters are associated with the occult, with, like, you know, black magic, stuff like that. It makes it scarier. It adds a supernatural element as well as like a cosmic horror element, because as the time you start realizing it, it's not spiritual, it's more than that, and it's scary. But essentially Azathoth, and this is a debate in the community too, is that we are Azathoth, like he is dreaming us. We are Azathoth, he is Azathoth. You know, it's kind of I forgot what that philosophical system is called, where it's like everything is God basically. But that's in this universe, Azathoth is basically we're his dream. So if Azathoth ever wakes up, we cease to exist. So it's the ultimate meaning. We don't mean anything. You know, it's the ultimate, like, you know, black metal philosophy, cosmicism, cosmic horror. Like, we do not matter at all. We don't even exist. We're just Azathoth's dream. As soon as he wakes up, what have you. But in the lore, Azathoth has 3 children, and the firstborn of Azathoth is Nyarlathotep, who we just read about. And then, if I'm not mistaken, the Darkness, and then the Nameless Mist, although those might be alternated. And within that is a dark inverted trinity, so an unholy trinity, and that is the central cult of the mythos. But only, you know, the most initiated know. You know, specifically the cult of Azathoth. And most of the cult of Azathoth tries to prevent him from waking up. Nyarlathotep's cult really just wants to worship him and do what he wants to do, but he always, you know, he's very Faustian. You know, he's very much like Lucifer. He's very much like Mephistopheles or whatever, where he tricks you. You know, it's very, you know, Faustian. And so they're both scary characters. You know, it gets really dark, and you know, a lot of people bail out on Lovecraft when we start getting to this element, because it is satanic per se. But as I've said, it transcends Satanism, and it's like cosmicism. But anyways, I actually do have Azathoth able to be read like how we normally do in here. This is the Dagon book, and I am very sad to report to you that it looks like our friend stopped at the evil clergyman and gave the evil clergyman a I think that's a B. It may be an A. I don't know. Their A's and B's kind of look the same, so maybe it's an A. I think the evil clergyman's an A. But they didn't get to the fragments of Azathoth. Now this is like a page long, so I'm just gonna read it to you, and then we'll kind of go back and discuss lore. So I'll just read this little kind of intro part here. It says 4 fragments. Excuse me. These fragments found among Lovecraft's paper are presumably his attempts to set down in rudimentary form preparatory to expansion into longer stories. Some of his dreams, none were ever expanded. Keys to the dream source of some of these fragments can be found in Lovecraft's letters. And so let's just discuss a little bit more about this short story before we read it. Is that Azathoth is the beginning, as I've said, an incomplete novel written by Lovecraft. It was written in June 1922 and published as a fragment in the journal Leaves in 1938 after Lovecraft's death. It is the first piece of fiction to mention the fictional being Azathoth, one of the major entities, as I've said, in Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, though the entity only appears in the title. So I don't want you to be disappointed. You're not going to see some blubberous, bubbly eye tentacle with disturbing orifices with tentacled monsters singing it in flutes as it sleeps in a black hole in space beyond time. It's, you know, you're not going to get that in this. But let's read it, and we'll talk more about Azathoth. Azathoth by H.P. Lovecraft. When age fell upon the world, and wonder went out in the minds of men, when gray cities reared to smoky skies tall towers grim and ugly, and whose shadow none might dream of the sun or of the spring's flowering meads. When learning stripped earth of her mantle of beauty, and poets sang no more save a twisted phantom seen with bleared and inward-looking eyes. When these things had come to pass, and childish hopes had gone away forever, there was a man who traveled out of life on a quest into the spaces whither the world's dream had fled. Of the name and abode of this man but little is written, for they were of the waking world only. Yet it is said that both were obscure. It is enough to know that he who dwelt in a city of high walls where sterile twilight reigned, and that he toiled all day among shadow and turmoil, coming home at evening to a room whose one window opened not on the fields and groves, but on a dim court where other windows stared in full despair. From the casement one might seem only walls and windows, except sometimes when one leaned far out and peered aloft at the small stars that passed. And because mere walls and windows might soon drive to madness a man who dreams and reads much, the dweller in the room used night after night to lean out and peer aloft to glimpse some fragment of things beyond the waking world and the greyness of tall cities. After years, he began to call the slow-sailing stars by name, and to follow them in fancy when they glided regretfully out of sight, till at length his vision opened to many secret vistas whose existence no common eye suspects. And one night a mighty gulf was bridged, and the dream-haunted sky swelled down to the lonely watcher's windows to merge with the close air of his room and make him a part of their fabulous wonder. There came to that room wild streams of violent midnight glittering with dust of gold, vortifice of dust and fire swirling out of the ultimate spaces and heavy with perfumes from beyond the worlds. Opaque oceans poured there, litten by suns that the eye may never behold, and having in their whirlpools strange dolphins and sea nymphs of unrememberable deeps. Noiseless infinity eddied around the dreamer and wafted him away without even touching the body that leaned stiffly from the lonely window. And from days not counted in men's calendars, the tides of far spheres bore him gently to join the dreams for which he longed, the dreams that men have lost, and in the course of many cycles they tenderly left him sleeping on a green sunrise shore, a green shore fragrant with lotus blossoms, and starred by red camelites. Circa 1922. Pretty far out, man. It's another dream cycle, bro. Gotta get that hashish so we can go into the sky, dude. Really bad shame that he passed, because that was, it's beautiful. I love it. It's so, you could tell it's dream cycle, but you could tell it's called Azathoth, so it means that we were going to actually get to see this entity perhaps for the first time. So who knows, maybe it would have been really beautiful and peaceful and totally in like absolute nightmare fuel, because in the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadaf, when Randolph Carter is sojourning the dream world, he is warned to stay away from a certain part of the dream world because it'll take you to the court of Azathoth and you will basically just never return. You'll just go crazy. It's like you're in hell. And or that's what it alludes to. So my mind has always thought that it was going to turn out to be kind of like this guy who lives in the city. And it's kind of true. I prefer to live out in nature and stuff because it feels like you're around more of God's creation, and you can feel more attuned to spiritual life and stuff like that. And the more you move to the city, you're around man's creation, and it blocks out the sun and it hides nature unless you go to parks. And so I like that touch of that, where it's like, and even certain shamans say that humanity, we've moved so far away from nature and from God that we've lost ourselves in our cities. So I like this idea that that's the focal point of this character, and he's going, but then he starts going into the dream world. It's almost like Azathoth himself draws him to himself. But since it talks about spheres and bubbles, maybe it's Yog-Sothoth bringing him to Azathoth. So, there's always this kind of cool conversation of, is Azathoth really this evil thing? Is it a being of love? You never know. Arguably Lovecraft, no, it's not. Of course it's not. But the dream world is so nice, so it's like a dream within a dream, bro. Inception. Oh my God, watch out. But anyways, yeah, it's cool. I think that these characters are awesome. I hope to see them in a movie one day, if it's done correctly, and because I think nobody's ever seen a monster like Azathoth. Like that's it's a really cool creature, you know. And if I'm not mistaken, it has been voted that he is the most powerful character in fiction, because if he wakes up, he could just wipe out, you know, we're all dead. And, you know, it's kind of cool to think of that, you know, like it wakes up, we all cease to exist. He kind of looks around, sees all the flute players, and just kind of sits there and just screams, you know, right. And he falls back to sleep, and all this different reality is created. That's scary to think about if that's how the real world is. Thankfully, it's not, because this is all bullshit and fake fantasy fiction. But yeah, so what did y'all? What do you guys all think? You know, I really think that it's sad that Lovecraft wasn't able to bless us with a full novel. I'm sad that he wasn't able to finish Azathoth, as well as some of his other stories, like The Descent or The Descendant or something like that. I really think we probably could have gotten. I mean, his works, what he has given us, are cohesive enough, but there are still some missing pieces, and still some writings that he possibly could have written that would have ceased quite a bit of arguments about the cosmology of the universe. So anyways, before I get off, I just wanted to pull up something, since we're talking about Azathoth. This person also, you know, there is considered a misconception about Azathoth, that he's really not dreaming our reality, and it's not like what I have just related to you. Like I said, there could be many arguments and debates about this. Like we're getting into like severe nerdy territory here with all this. But you know, I just wanted to read, you know, like in The Haunter of the Dark, there's a line that says, "Azathoth, have mercy," and then there's this poem that says, "Here the vast Lord of all in darkness muttered things he had dreamed but could not understand, while near him shapeless bat things flopped and fluttered in idiot vortexes that ray streams fan. They dance insanely to the high, thin whining of a cracked flute clutched in a monstrous paw, whence flow the aimless waves whose chance combining gives each frail cosmos its eternal law." And so the point, you can see that this poem describes Azathoth as dreaming. And so it is possible that Azathoth just is kind of like Cthulhu. He's sleeping and just dreaming. But it, in my opinion, that poem and that fragment of that poem alludes to the fact that Azathoth is dreaming all of reality. Because there would be no other reason why the cult would want him to stay asleep, because pretty much every other cult in this mythos wants to wake up their entity. And so why would they want Azathoth not to be awoken if he is supposed to be, you know, the one that is the founder of universal laws, nature's laws, all those kinds of things? That would imply that if he would wake up, that would stop. Therefore, it would be that he is dreaming these laws, these natures, these things. And, you know, it'd be cool to have another person who's really well versed in the mythos to come in here and argue with me on all of this. I think that could be a super nerdy YouTube video. But I've always viewed it that he is dreaming our reality, and that's what I'm going to stay by. I think there's a lot of evidence pointing to that. And you know, maybe if we could somehow summon Lovecraft from the dead, and then maybe he could just answer that ourselves. But you know, that I don't feel like that's worth, you know, cursing our eternal souls to find that out. You know, it's really not that important at the end of the day. But it would definitely stop these ancient nerd fights, for sure. But maybe we can hit up our boy Charles Dexter Ward. Maybe he might know. He's got the or what Herbert West, the Reanimator. Maybe we could just get him to redo it, man. But anyways, yeah. Thank you for stopping by and kind of nerding out. This is we're starting to get into the real nitty gritty of the mythos here. A bunch of good hard good meat on it, and pretty soon. Nyarlathotep and Azathoth are going to be mentioned quite a lot. The Necronomicon is going to appear quite more often, and Cthulhu is as well as Dagon and the Deep Ones, and some other kind of insectoid aliens that we will get to eventually. So there's so much more. Eventually, there are some kind of sci-fi, some science fiction stuff going on with this, with aliens too in this universe. And interdimensional beings, that technically Cthulhu is an alien. So it's awesome. I hope you guys all enjoy it, and I hope that you enjoy that we kind of went into the more kind of occult aspects of this mythology and of this mythos. So I would say the next video after this will probably be the Cats of Althar. And because this is some really dark heavy stuff here, so let's kind of take it back to like kitty cats and Bastet, and how you don't mess with cats, and if you hurt with cats you're gonna pay. Kind of ancient Bastet cult mentality in the house and that story, and we'll do that. And then like I said, why don't I'm at the Lagoon. I'm ready to go to another seaport town. Let's head to Kingsport. It's supposed to be cleaner than Innsmouth anyways. So we'll go do that and hang out with a terrible old man and learn about that strange high house on the mist. So until then, I hope you enjoyed all of this. Google the images of Azathoth and Nyarlathotep and see how gnarly Nyarlathotep is. So gnarly, bro. Check how cool they are. It's a shame that we haven't seen this on big screen yet. Now, in saying that, I just want to do a quick shout out to the video game The Shore. That is personally one of my favorite Lovecraft games. You get to see Nyarlathotep in that, and as well as his father. Spoiler, but the game's been out for so long, it's your fault, not mine. Spoiler warning. And other mythos characters in it, such as Cthulhu. It's basically the ultimate Lovecraft game. I know some people gripe about it because there's not a sanity mechanic, stuff like that, whatever. It's awesome. Go check it out. It captures the vibes of all these characters that we just studied, and I hope to see you in the next video. And until then, stay salty, stay spooky, and Cthulhu Fatagan.